Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. Unfortunately, we've got a big-time blowout loss to talk about. Unfortunately, the Ravens blew out the Seahawks 37-3, 515 yards to Seattle's 151. Time of possession was like 40 minutes to 20. Seattle loses by 34 points on the road. Just decimated in all three phases of the game. And we're here to talk about it. We're not too happy about it, but we're here, and hope you're doing okay other than having to sit through that game along with everyone else. Welcome in.
Yeah, that game was not a lot of fun to watch. Probably was if you're a Raiders or a Ravens fan, but man, there's very little to like about that game in any way. And it felt a lot like week one. The score was worse, but they're playing a better team, but they just got ran over defensively, and offensively, well, they got beat at the line of scrimmage on every play, and it showed. It was just ugly. And it was, like I said, the second time this has happened this year where they just didn't show up. And I don't know what to think. I'm at a loss for words for just how bad this is.
Well, speaking of the Rams, which was the first game of the season, this was the most lopsided loss since the Rams came to town, I think, in 2017 and beat us 42-7. Losing by 34 points yesterday was there. But you know what? I'm going to put this in perspective just a little bit. Baltimore is having a great year. They're on fire right now on both sides of the ball. The best DVOA totals through 9 games from 1981 to 2023. They ranked third overall in history during that time, not just this year. So they're doing some great things. Hats off to them. They had a great scheme. We got outcoached, we got outplayed, outmuscled, outgained, everything that you can possibly imagine. And it's just one of those deals. A lot of folks are going to point directly to Geno Smith. Geno Smith did not play well, had a horrific game. His QBR ratings and so forth, I think he had the third worst quarterback performance of any quarterback in the NFL this season. But I agree with Pete Carroll in that it just wasn't Geno Smith. It was a whole host of other things. The offensive line played horrible. Our wide receivers, I thought, played poorly. It was a poorly called game by Shane Waldron. Nothing went right on the defensive side of the ball. I think the 7th worst rushing game against the Seahawks all time, as far as yards allowed and yards per play. And it was just, by all accounts, it was just a clubbing. I mean, that's all it was. It was just one of those things where you hope you're on the positive side of that equation. Like you said, the Ravens fans, I'm sure, were very happy about that, along with their players, and deservedly so. They played a great game. My biggest concern coming out of this game, I thought, for me, 2 things. The offensive line, just horrendous. They killed any opportunity that we had, either running the ball or Geno successfully being able to throw. The second thing that really hit me on this thing was Shane Waldron. Just a really bad scouting and preparation performance from Shane Waldron, and then in-game adjustments were just non-existent. Just had no short game whatsoever in the passing game to allow us to get into any rhythm. They were just coming through in waves. Seemed like they had one more guy than we had ability to block virtually every play throughout the entire thing. They had the most pressure rates of any Ravens game on their side of the ball since 2018 at over 54% pressure rate in this game. And then running the ball, it was just non-existent. I mean, I think we gained like 1.9 yards per attempt.
So I don't know, like, I mean, there are some things that you and I would have liked to see from Waldron, from, different things in order to help Geno out. But he had guys open short early and he didn't throw the ball. That's not on Waldron.
I agree.
He had guys open down the field a little more and he missed them. That wasn't on Waldron. The running game sucked. The offensive line was bad. We went through both of those. And those aren't Geno's fault in any way, but it also takes away the play action when you can't run the ball. And things were limited. And it's hard to say that there weren't attempts to make adjustments, but when the team goes out and doesn't execute and goes 3 and out, that doesn't mean there weren't adjustments made. It just means the team didn't do anything with them.
That's true. So we were 1 for 12 on third down, so we didn't have a lot of opportunities to make adjustments.
We were 1 for 12 on first down. It was awful. There was nothing. It's not just third down. It's literally just across the board. And you're right. It's not just Geno, and I don't want to say that it is. That would be unfair, but we have to come to grips with the fact that he played absolutely terribly.
Absolutely.
And
it's not just this is the first week.
No, this is the 4th week in a row. 4 or 5 weeks in a row
where we're not doing well.
Yeah. And it's become this regular thing. So why are we having this problem every week now? And I mean, he's turning the ball over like crazy. He's making bad decisions with the ball. He's holding on to it way too long. He's taking way too many just sacks that he has no business taking. It's hard to stand behind the guy who was so good last year. Like, I think at some level we need to figure out what's going on there, because so much of what else is happening, it would still make life hard if you know what I mean. If he was playing better, the offense would still struggle a little bit because of the offensive line and running game, but they have no hope if he plays like this. And I think that's what happens. Why I ended up with 37 in this game is because if you're on the defense and you're seeing what you're seeing on the offensive side of the ball, like there's just not a lot that you feel compelled to do when it's over, and because your offense is just worthless.
And I disagree with that in some respects. I hear that in like the end of the third quarter into the fourth quarter, and there's no coming back. But when you're in the first half and we're down by 14 or whatever, you still have fight. I mean, these
absolutely.
Guys are
I'm not
pros,
talking about really about that, but I'm just mean like you get later in the game, they put up a lot of points late in the third quarter and into the fourth. And by then the defense was just
gassed.
Yeah. They just didn't care.
And they'd just been run over.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the last, since Uchenna Nwasu's been out with the pectoral muscle thing in the last 3 games, Seahawks have let opponents run for an average of 193 yards per game, 5.5 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns on the ground. So this isn't just isolated. This has been happening. And the offense has had its struggles. 2 turnovers on the day against the Ravens, but that's their 4th straight game with multiple turnovers.
Yeah.
And it's that really hasn't happened since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think you kind of have to measure this too against like a strength of schedule argument. Seattle had a pretty decent and easy schedule in the first half of the season. We knew it was going to be harder down the stretch. That part of it is started with the Cincinnati Cleveland games. Now this game, it only gets harder in the next 5 weeks. And we're seeing them struggle a little bit. There's some growing pains. Some of the second year growth that we wanted to see out of our draft picks from the year prior kind of struggled a little bit and have been healthy. The offensive line has been a turnstile. I was kind of, I don't know if this was the thing or not, and maybe you can kind of shed some light on it. I didn't really care for the lineup that we put forth on the offensive line this week.
I would agree with that.
When things were seemingly working, and then we just made changes for change's sake because guys got healthy. So you had Haynes back in there. I guess you could say he had an average game, at least graded out wise.
I didn't think he played
but
well.
Peters was in there, and Forsythe was benched, and I don't know. I mean, it's really hard. Like you said, it's hard to point to any one particular thing.
The part with Peters over Forsythe, it might have come down to just, they had a competition in practice and Forsythe or Peters won, so he played. I would have thought that Forsythe might have been better in there simply because of the fact that he's a little more athletic, and while he's going to make more mistakes, because Peters is, certainly a vet and a very good one. But he's 41, and the extra athleticism of having a younger player in there against this particular defense would have been nice. Haynes had, as far as I'm concerned, lost his job. So yeah, Bradford was banged up last week. And if that was the reason why he didn't play, then fine. But if it was a decision of choosing Haynes over Bradford, I would question that greatly, because Haynes hasn't played great. He hasn't played terribly, but he hasn't played great. And Bradford's been significantly better.
In addition to that, it's more of a continuity thing for me. You're going into a big game. There is no continuity, and you could have had at least some semblance of some with guys that have played together now for a few weeks. And it just seems like it's just constantly changing. There doesn't seem to be any rhythm there. And then you compound that by the fact that we're struggling to run the ball. You compound that to the fact that in this game anyway, I don't know who we could have lined up, to be completely honest, and had decent pass blocking. It was not good. When you have a 54% pressure rate, I know that Gino's not getting the ball out. In fact, he held the ball for an average of 2.95 seconds as far as time to throw the ball. Now that's pretty good time. And that's like 7th or 8th in the NFL this week, as far as time to throw the ball. We just didn't have anything open, or Gino held the ball and decided not to throw it. Haven't watched the all 22.
There were times he didn't have guys open. There were times he didn't throw the ball. If you've got Lockett on, he's the deep route, and so he's not getting open until 20 yards downfield, you can't wait for him against this pass rush. When you've got Smith-Njigba open on the slant, you need to take that, because otherwise you're going to get killed. And that's what happened. I would have liked to see them get the ball in the Lockett's hands a little faster, and maybe run other players deep and give him some more of that underneath stuff, since he's the guy that Gino is locked in on and isn't looking at anybody else for portions of the game. But
the argument against that would be that Gino's looking for matchup specific advantages, and so you're trying to take what the defense is going to give you. And I think that's part of it, as far as trying to hold out for the optimal route in your progression. But at the same time, Gino has not been good at all at diagnosing plays pre-snap.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're seeing a lot of undetected blitzes, missed blocks, things coming in where Geno's just not prepared. You can tell that he hasn't prepared for that. Whatever the defense is doing post snap, it surprises Geno, or the pocket collapses in a direction that, he's not anticipating. Some of those things seem to be an issue and a problem as well. Shane Waldron's gotten away from 13 personnel quite a bit, so there's not been as much tight end being held in to help with the blocking. It just seems completely discombobulated. I watched on the other side of the ball the Ravens successfully just play after play after play, conversion, third down conversion after third down conversion, march up and down the field, big plays, explosive running plays, just able to pick apart Seattle. And you just reverse that. When Seattle had the ball, they couldn't do anything. They would run into the loaded box for a 1 yard gain multiple times in this game, where there was just nothing. And
there was one play that I texted you about, where you could see Geno come up and change the play, and he changed it into a run against a 9-man box, and it went for like 1 yard. And you're like, why? What could you possibly be seeing that would make you switch to that running play?
It was better than the other play that they called, which is an indictment against Waldron. I mean, I don't know.
No, that is not an indictment against Waldron. That is entirely an indictment against Geno.
Here's the deal, though.
If you're going to make a change at the fly, you better change into a play that makes sense.
It's not so much of an indictment against Geno Smith. We've faced a couple of really elite defenses these last couple of weeks, and I do need to give the Ravens some credit here. They just played a masterful game, made some serious adjustments against us even in mid-game, and just took away everything that we could possibly want to do, and bullied us and outmuscled us and just outplayed us, wanted this game. Seattle looked like it didn't want to be there, wanted to play a finesse game against a bully, and it was just atrocious. It was hard to watch, really. And I do want to assign as much of that blame as necessary to Geno, yes, but that whole team didn't show up. It was just ugly.
Yeah, we've seen bad Geno for like 4 games in a row. I want to know what's up. I want to know what's changed. Is he hurt and we don't know? Is this a situation where he's not preparing like he did last year? Or is this just Geno and this is what he was in New York, and we're seeing it again now? And last year was just the aberration. And if that's the case, or either, or he's not preparing, if that's the case too.
This is against the number 1 defense in the NFL.
Yeah, it's 4 weeks in a row.
I know, but then we played the number 1 defense the week prior too.
True. And what about the 2 games before that?
The 2 games before that, it was total hit and miss.
What about, they're playing Carolina, which is bad on defense, and they couldn't move the ball. Right?
There's no consistency here. So I'm totally right there with you, Keith.
There is consistency. Don't know. It's been consistently bad.
I just don't know if I'm trying to be as fair as I can to a guy who isn't perfect by any means, who seemingly has all the weapons you could ask for on an offense, who doesn't seem to be helped at all by the scheme for whatever reason. I don't know what that reason is, but I think some of this is attributed to Shane Waldron. The offensive line has been just a complete turnstile, Keith. I mean, to the point where we've almost had the entire offensive line be backups at times during the season. And so the consistency hasn't been there. DK Metcalf has been hurt. Tyler Lockett's been hurt on some levels where they're not practicing regularly. So they're not developing that timing during practice, the communication necessary to I just think it's multifaceted. I think Geno is having issues, Keith. I agree. I'm not gonna be a homer here on Geno Smith. What I am saying though is it's more complex than just Geno being bad.
Oh, it is more complex than that, but
yeah.
I just refuse to make excuses for what I see as the biggest problem. And I know that he was good last year, but this team is not going to win many games when he plays the way he's been playing.
He seems like he's playing the same way he played the last 8 games of last year.
No, he's not even playing that well.
It's like 62% completion. There was times last year where he was completing close to 70% for the first half of the season. His interception to touchdown ratio, he had way more touchdowns last year. He was able to drive the ball downfield a lot more successfully last year. He had more time to do that, I think. And so far this year, I think that we've just had some offensive line challenges that we maybe didn't have last year. And those interceptable balls, those turnover worthy plays that he had last year that went without success on the defensive end, this year are turning into turnovers. And I think the law of averages is catching up to him, and he's an average quarterback, with a big play arm, a big play ability, gets himself into trouble, looks down receivers, those outs, those 20-yard out plays. I cringe every time he lets one go, because I just feel like we're one click away from a defender jumping her out against Geno, and that needs to change. And I don't know that. I think that's who he is. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to change. I think it's one of those deals where I think this is it. This is what we're going to get. This is what we get with Geno Smith, more or less, unless it's a perfectly blocked offensive line and he's got a running game and he can do play action. I think Geno Smith is optimal in that respect against league average defenses. When you get into really decent defenses and the pass rush win rate goes way up, and we have a tough time running the ball, and our guys are having a tough time pass blocking, Geno is susceptible to creating turnovers and swinging games against us. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I that's why I think long term, when we've always said this, Geno may not be and in fact is not the answer long term. Mm-hmm. He's an older quarterback. And I think, the question now becomes, did Seattle jump the gun thinking that they were going to be playoff worthy and could do some damage in the playoffs with the win last week against Cleveland, go out and get Leonard Williams, give up a 2nd round pick, and now realize they weren't as good as they thought they were. And we would really love to have that 2nd round pick back. Thank you. Because we could use it next year when we need to go quarterback hunting. I don't know. I don't want to be like ultra negative. This was a one-off. I bet they bounce back next week and figure out a way to get a win. Pete Carroll teams are notoriously like that. But long-term, this is an issue. And I don't know exactly what to do about it.
It doesn't feel like a one-off to me, because this game was bad, but you're right, it was a good defense. Go back 2 weeks and Cincinnati. That was awful by the offense, and that's not a great defense.
Not a bad defense.
It's not a good defense. It's middle of the road. And you go back to Carolina, and that is a bad defense, and they didn't do much there. The Rams game at the beginning of the year, that was just a pathetic showing all around.
If you go look at the whole total, Keith, we have got a shitty offense. Yeah. And on paper, we should have a great offense.
Yeah.
We have got a underperforming EPA lacking offense. I mean, we should be top 10 in almost every statistical category based on our personnel. And we are not. It is back of the, back of the line.
Yeah.
Bottom 30 percentile in the NFL this season. And it's completely underperforming.
And that is my concern. And I look at them and go, well, what? There's been a lot of offensive line turnover. They've used, 42 different configurations of an offensive line with all of the in-game substitutions and injuries and, all the stuff they've had to do. It's been crazy. But there have been games where that offensive line is held up and they weren't the problem. I know they need Abe Lucas back. He's their best offensive lineman, and
got a bit of good news for you then. Pete Carroll came out and said that looks like Abe Lucas could be ready by next week, back by next week. There's a small chance he could return this week, but next week for sure, according to Pete Carroll.
I mean, they need him back. Right tackle right now it's been a major problem. Curhan can run block, but he can't pass block. Forsyth is a better pass blocker, but not as good of a run blocker. It's hard to say if Peters can still play or not based on this game, because it kind of didn't look like it, but I'm willing to give him, the benefit of the doubt, given that he's a multi-time All-Pro, even if he is 41 at this point. We'll see, but right tackle's been a struggle. It's been a problem. And he's a guy that last year was their best offensive lineman for most of the season. If he can come back and
Charles Cross has been mediocre so far this year.
Yeah. I mean, he got hurt, came and missed all that time, came back and has not played well. So I think that he's been better than Forsyth was, but that's a low bar to get over. He hasn't been good. And so if they can get Abe Lucas back at 80% of what he was last year, it'll be a big upgrade. It really will. I think they need to get Anthony Bradford back in it at right guard, and just at some point you've got to just roll with what works. And Phil Haynes doesn't work. Jason Peters didn't work. Like I said, we'll see. We just need to play the younger guys and let them work through stuff, because Peters is never going to be a long-term answer. Right?
Yeah. He should be a backstop for sure.
Yeah. That's all he needs. So
the good
they need
news
to get a
is,
younger guy in there that they can develop.
The good news is that we are a rebuilding team that's trying to win. And sometimes you run into teams that are just better than you. And that was obvious. Baltimore Ravens are a better football team than the Seattle Seahawks today. That's just no question. I don't even know if we could line up in 5 games and have a game that we score 21 points. I mean, that is a good team.
Not unless Gino decides to have a good game.
Yeah. And hero ball it out and just luck out. That can happen. The good news is we got a young roster that's up and coming and developing. We have to figure out that quarterback spot long term. I don't know how that's going to work out. We'll see. The good news is a guy like Boye Mafe had a sack again, 6 consecutive games, franchise record with that. So let's acknowledge him. I also had one of 2 takeaways, forcing a fumble and recovering it. So he's playing really well. Yesterday, with 9 tackles, Bobby Wagner became a player, only one of 7 in NFL history to go over the 1,600 tackles mark. So that was pretty cool. Other than that, let's see. Trey Brown had a turnover as well, and continues to play really well. in that spot. Other than that, there wasn't anything to cheer for in this game, really.
Witherspoon played pretty well.
Yeah, he continues to play. He's the most consistent player on that defense, I think.
I will say that I'm getting really tired of watching Julian Love miss tackles.
Among other safeties.
The Seahawks paid for Julian Love to come in because he was supposed to be a better tackler than Ryan Neal. Ryan Neal was great in coverage, but wasn't a great tackler. Okay, he wasn't a good tackler. But they went with a much more expensive option because he was supposed to be a better tackler in the middle. And he has been atrocious so far this season.
So the Ravens had 4 touchdown drives of 60 plus yards against the Seahawks. That's as many as the Seahawks had in their last 4 games total. The Ravens had 3 touchdown drives of at least 78 yards. That's more than the Seahawks have had in their last 5 games. Seahawks had 26 missed tackles in their first 7 games before assess being run over with 14 missed tackles on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was awful.
So that just adds to it. It's like the defense struggled too. And a lot of those came in the first half. They had 125, 130 yards in the first half against us and a couple touchdowns rushing. It just got worse in the second half. Yeah. So you just got to throw this thing out. I mean, what else can you do?
I think that's the end result. Let's just take this game just like we did with the Rams game week 1. Just throw it out, just be like, okay, they kicked our ass. Let's
they did.
go. Let's forget this game happened. Let's go prep for the next one, because continuing to dive through this one just isn't actually going to help anything. It was a bad game.
So
bad game by everybody.
Well, we need to win these next 2, because these are the winnable games of the next 4.
Yes.
4 essentially. The Commanders and the Rams are the next teams up. We travel.
The Commanders are genuinely awful.
Yeah. So the Commanders, I mean, let's get that win. Let's get back to it on Sunday and see what happens. We'll preview that game at the end of the week. The Rams game, that's a redo. I'd love to be able to go down there and get them on their field, but then it gets tough. It gets real tough. 49ers, Cowboys, 49ers again, and Eagles. Again, that's the tale right there as far as how this season's going to go. We've said it the last couple of weeks as well. I'd like to be able to split those games, and we'll see what happens there, but it'll be tough. It's discouraging, because you see the opportunities, you see the talent, you see the glimmer of what this team can be, yet we're just not quite there yet. Maturity wise, offensive line, everything's just not quite come together. And you do need that premier leadership with a premier quarterback, I think, to kind of tie it all together. And we just don't have that. Gino's good, but he's not a franchise guy. He just isn't. And love Gino, love his attitude, love the way he comes to work every day. But there's just certain limitations that guys have in the NFL, and I think we're seeing that play out. There's a large book of evidence at this point as far as what he can do, what he can't do, what situations he's good at, and what situations he struggles with. And teams have more film on Gino now and know how to play that to that, and they can be successful because of our offensive line struggles. I think they can create different pressure points, and dial those in, and that's just what happens. That's the NFL. But we'll see. It's still a long season. Anything can happen. Seattle can get hot. I think they do need to kind of figure out the running game to help Gino. We need to figure that out. I think Charbonnet could help. We need
I want to see more
physicality in this team.
I want to see more Charbonnet.
Yeah.
The offensive line, when the offensive line is blocking well, Walker's going to be able to do more with that. When the offensive line is not blocking as well, the physicality and ability to break tackles that Charbonnet brings is more valuable. And I think they need to recognize what's going on and give Charbonnet more carries so that it helps.
Agreed. All right. Let's get out of here. We'll come back later this week and we'll have further discussion on what we can do and what's going on and preview that next game. So you can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. And when you do, hit that subscribe button. We've also got our own YouTube channel. Again, if you haven't seen the YouTube video side of this show, we're on our YouTube channel, Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get it into your feed every week and you won't miss a single show. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWCHawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.